Welcome to the CVC Insider series. Today, I'm very happy to have Marta Pinho to join us from Amadeus Ventures. Marta, welcome. And would you mind spending a few minutes describing your personal journey into corporate venturing?
Of course. Thanks for having me, Nicola. I will try to be brief and guide you through my previous experiences and how I ended up in CVC. So I was born and raised in Portugal, and that's where I started my professional career. Almost right out of college, I joined the financial VC in Portugal called Portugal Ventures, one of the biggest and oldest VCs in Portugal. And I was fortunate enough to join one of the teams in Portugal Ventures that was investing in early stage startups. So we're talking about pre-seed, seed deals mainly. And probably because of that, I think I had the chance of have the autonomy that I wouldn't have if I would have joined a team that would be looking into later stage deals. And so early on in my professional experience, I was covering basically all the stages of the investment funnel, no? So from deal flow generation, negotiation, closing, portfolio management, and that was an amazing experience for someone so young and so inexperienced, no? If you can tell it. So at Portugal Ventures, I was actually looking and investing in areas such as e-commerce, digital, biotech, energy. So very diverse. We were focused and investing mainly in Portugal, and so we had kind of a broad no areas of investment, and so this exposure to so different industries, also the number I was involved in quite some a significant number of deals, so that gave me the opportunity of being involved and negotiate deal structure for a significant amount of situations, and also on portfolio management, because we are talking about quite early stage companies, very small teams, sometimes inexperienced in the sense of entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs, with not that much, not the structure that more mature companies would have. And I would be their first contact point within the organization, Portugal Ventures. I was also exposed to numerous situations that were very important learning experience for me as well, trying to solve them together with the entrepreneurs. So I was there for 5 years, very intense and enriching experience. And after those 5 years, I was thinking about my next career step, and I was feeling the need or willing to go to the other side of the table, so to join a startup. And while thinking about that, I thought that that was probably the right timing for me to fulfill a dream that I had been silencing for a few years. That was to travel long term. I love to travel, super passionate, and I thought, okay, it's the right timing. And I traveled for a year, for around 7 months in Asia and 5 months in South America. And I will not lie, this was especially enriching from a personal point of view and something I will never forget. But I tried to use this chance to also get closer to the local startup ecosystems, and I did this by looking for events every time I would arrive to a new city. What type of events are happening? Most of the cases, we're talking about smaller, no, either meetups, startup pitch competitions, and stuff like that. But I also was lucky enough that in India, for example, I was able to join a few bigger events like a startup festival in Bangalore, a social entrepreneurship event in Mumbai. So it was also a very good opportunity for me to understand, how these different countries and cities, how the ecosystem was, and understand a bit the differences. And then after this year, so I came back to the plan, put the plan in action of going to the other side of the table, and I joined a startup, a rocket internet startup. At the time was called Couponation. So it was a marketplace for online discounts and coupons, based in Munich and Germany. And they were one of the fastest growing rocket internet companies at the time, but they were looking to start growing inorganically through acquisitions. So they thought good fit with my profile, not to leverage my the skills that I had developed in financial VC and transfer them to the M&A side. And then after my experience in cuponation, I joined I joined a digital group in Germany called Scout 24, and I joined specifically the Auto Scout 24 brand. So it was a platform, a leading platform in Europe for secondhand car listings. And how the company was structured was basically divided into dealers and consumer, and I was working on the consumer side, so the ones looking to buy a car. And I joined the company also to work on the M&A activities, leading the M&A activities on the consumer side. And so this means analyzing potential targets, assessing potential synergies, defining the integration strategy, and then leading the execution of the integration strategy as well. And then the role eventually expanded on top of that to other strategic topics within the organization. And so after starting in financial VC, moving to more towards M&A, first in a startup, then into a bigger organization, I come back to the VC world, but this time in a corporate VC, in the CVC of Amadeus. And I think I mentioned this when we first met, that I feel that it's a bit like closing the circle.
It does, yes.
Yeah, and I think it's actually a very good fit with my previous experiences and what I had the chance to the skills that I had the chance to develop. And so today, and that's, I think, will be the focus of this conversation, I work in Amadeus, and maybe for the ones that are not that much into the travel industry, I think it would be helpful to give a brief overview on what Amadeus does. So Amadeus is a technology player in the global travel industry. It started in the late 80s, founded by 4 airlines, Iberia, Air France, Lufthansa, and SAS, in the distribution business. So with a global distribution system connecting the travel providers on one side, airlines, hotels, and many others, to the travel agencies. And then some years later, Amadeus also got into the IT business, so developing IT solutions for the same players in the travel industry. So if we look at Amadeus today, and I think this is relevant for you to understand a bit who is behind the CVC and what we bring today. Amadeus has a global footprint, is present in more than 190 countries. And if we look at our customer base, if we think about airlines, for example, we have more than 400 airlines as customers. Hotels, we have more than 1 million hotel properties as customers. And so this can be very relevant for a startup willing to come into this industry, address this market. And that's very important for us as a CVC to give you that brief overview. And maybe now getting into the point, Amadeus Ventures, Amadeus startup investment program. So it was founded in 2014 to invest in early stage startups that were sitting at the crossroads of technology and travel. And so as a corporate investor, we have put a strong focus on strategic value. How can we, through this investments, generate strategic value for the corporation and for the startups? Maybe to share that the two of the main objectives of Amadeus Ventures today. The first one is to find and invest and Amadeus' next growth opportunity. And so here we're talking about investment opportunities with a very significant market size, and where we Amadeus can accelerate the growth of that opportunity. So potentially this areas can become a business line of Amadeus in the future. And then the second one is on supporting the ecosystem of partners that are closer to our existing solutions, existing portfolio. And so here we're talking more about investment opportunities or startups that are closer to what Amadeus is doing, where we see immediate collaboration opportunities, learning opportunities, and things we can do together. So I hope I didn't take too long, and that
No.
was a kind of a good overview of what I've been doing and what I'm doing today.
Very nice. And I will have many places to double click.
Yeah.
But it's quite interesting to look at your personal journey, because it nearly feels like if you were to design a perfect journey into Amadeus Ventures, that's the way.
Was not planned.
I know, and you can't plan for that, but you do have the love for travel. You did a financial VC beforehand, and pre-seed and seed is very different from M&A, which then you added into your skill set. So let me start with financial VC side, especially on the pre-seed and seed, where you're working with probably most of them are young entrepreneurs, and you were very young. What did you find most challenging to support these entrepreneurs, to select them, to support them?
I think it was two things here. Obviously, will not hide the lack of experience that I that I had. No, I was learning as well, and but I think in that sense we had, first of all, I was obviously having and working closely with the senior members of the team and supported by them. And I think on the other side, the fact that I was not focused in a specific industry like I am today, for example, in Amadeus, but investing in companies that were in very different industries, no, with very different teams, with very different backgrounds, very different solutions, business models, etc. So it was definitely challenging. What we were doing at the time, and I think was very important for me as well. We were having and building a network of experts in various fields that would support us, no, and topics that whenever we would find relevant. And in your question, that when you mentioned that most of them were for sure very young as well, yes, that's true. And that I myself was quite young, and so I like to say that we were both learning together, no, and I think for them to have probably someone that was as eager to learn and to deep dive on those topics, but being supported by this network of experts and by the internal and more senior team, I can see some benefits as well. No, probably the time I would have to dedicate to them, and the eagerness to find and solve those solutions, solve those problems, and learn from them as well and together.
Very nice. And then you mentioned this 1 year traveling, which from the last 45 interviews of CVC practitioners, you're the first one to have done it.
Really?
But what I like about this is it was not a 1 year traveling just to visit the world. Clearly, that's probably what you wanted, but you added meetups and meetings with startups ecosystem along the way. And that nearly feels like better than an MBA in a way. Can you maybe give the audience some tips about what to do when you do this kind of traveling to make sure that you learn as much as possible?
Definitely. No, I think it comes back to meeting people and finding the right channels to get to the people, no. And for me, I was always doing my homework before getting and even most of the times before booking the flight or the train, because I had time. No, I was not having 2 weeks to optimize. I would try to find if there were any relevant events that were happening in the months that I was planning to be traveling in that region, to make it work to make it work. No, so for example, those activities, those events, bigger events that I had a chance to participate in India, I saw where the dates when they were happening in Bangalore and Mumbai, and I adjusted the trip accordingly.
So
And
strategic planning.
yes, 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 and I'm very happy that I did, because those are the type of experiences that you take with you, know, and that you remember afterwards. But it doesn't need to be necessarily this big events. So there's always, if you go to websites like Meetups, or I don't remember now the exact names. I had like all of them on my bookmarks, and I was checking every now and then. There's so many things happening in every city. You just need to find and just go there and meet the. And one thing that I found was that most of this entrepreneurs and or people interested in the startup ecosystem, the locals, they're just so eager to have the chance, no, to use this forum as well, to engage with foreigners that have different backgrounds and experiences. So everyone is very open to share and to exchange experiences. So I think it's much easier than what you would think at the first hand. Yeah.
Very nice. Another part I want to double click is you mentioned the opportunity to have a lot of autonomy when you started in this financial VC. And you mentioned this in relation of being able to engage with pre-seed and seed. So if you can explain more what you meant by autonomy and how it could be useful for the audience to understand why.
Yeah, maybe I think I didn't explain myself clearly. What I was mentioning and connecting the autonomy was with the fact that I was not just doing analysis and providing analysis to some senior member of the team, but I was actually leading the process from meeting the startup, screening, pitching it to the board, getting approval or not from the board to negotiate the best deal terms within a specific interval, engaging with legal to close the deal, and then portfolio management. So this was the type of experiences that I had early on in my career, obviously supervised, but I was able to lead and to drive those conversations.
Very, very nice. And then one of the things you mentioned is that you covered many industries. So it was not just a quantity of deals, but also the number of industries. Was that not a challenge? And
Yes.
would you have preferred to have just one industry you could have focused on? Or do you think it's actually a good way to start your career to be able to look at many industries?
No, I agree. It was definitely a challenge, but I also think that it was a great way to start my career to early on, no, have a broad experience of different industries, business models, teams, backgrounds. And but coming back to the challenge, I think that's probably one of the reasons that after 5 years I told you that I wanted to go to the other side of the table. I think it was probably I was looking for some focus in a specific industry, and to get the chance to um, go to the other side and actually be part of a specific project. And I think that's probably coming from the fact that the exposure to the number of industries, number of company was just so wide, that I got to a point where I felt, no, I really need to have a single focus now.
Very nice. Now I'm going to ask maybe a tough questions, but from the financial VC time, your travel time, your startup time, and your M&A time, what's your key takeaway from each? Maybe one key takeaway that you use today in your role.
As you mentioned in the beginning, I think all of them end up being so complementary to each other and so useful to what I'm doing today. For example, my experience in the financial VC, one of the things I highlight are the technical skills, no, the financial skills, valuation, deal structuring, also negotiation. This is something that it's still very valuable for me today in the CVC world. And that's one from financial VC. From the travel, from the year that I spent travel, I think just increasing even more, if possible, my passion for this industry, and to deepen my experience into the pain points of the of the traveler experience. That is something that is part of our mission, no, to address and contribute to solving and ease those ones. Then here I would maybe the startup and the M&A, I would bundle them together. I see them more like both of kind of M&A within a corporation, and I think the skills and the experiences that I had here are very aligned or very valuable for the C part of the CVC world. So the fact that, for example, when talking about M&A, the integration strategy, um, definition and execution, I was not looking and discussing with my colleagues in different businesses and support functions as well, and potential collaboration opportunities, but I was discussing how to execute the integration strategy, and so this, um, working with the different teams, try to get buy-in from them, try to somehow make them prioritize this topic of the integration of the targets within their day-to-day businesses. It's definitely something in a different context that I still need to do today. So to navigate the internal corporate landscape, to engage with the different teams and try to get them on board, so that everything works as smoothly as possible. It's something that it's a crucial part of my day-to-day job today, and so that I think this experience has been quite valuable as well.
It's actually interesting. Very few people have this experience from pre-seed all the way to the exit and late stage. Do you have a stage you prefer?
I today at Amadeus Ventures, our sweet spot is Series A. And the reason for that is because as a corporate investor, we're looking to invest in companies at a stage where we believe we can add the most value. And we look for companies that already have a product, at least some few customers, early customers, and some early traction, so that if we're talking about what can we do together, thinking about our customer base that I mentioned in the beginning, introducing them to our customers, or all the way up to a potential integration in one of our products, they need to be at a specific stage so that we can work together. And so I would probably say that the stage that I'm working of the companies that I'm working with today allows me and Amadeus Ventures and Amadeus to make the most of our investments, having this corporate background. Yeah.
Very nice. And in a way, it's your ability to influence the outcome positively, which relates to Amadeus Corporation, which gives you all these superpowers. And when I think about Series A, indeed, you start to have these signs of product market fit. And my guess is one of the superpowers is a go-to-market and early validation. Can you talk about what are these superpowers that you have seen Amadeus bringing to your portfolio companies?
Definitely. I think, and those are also the main reasons I would say that the startups come to us and look for an investment from Amadeus Ventures is this global footprint in the travel industry, and also the fact that we, as a tech provider, we are operator agnostic. No, we work with a
All
very
of them.
significant amount of players. And so I think it comes back to leveraging what we have. No, the customer base on one side, the the very broad portfolio of products that we have and the different verticals of the travel industry, and what that can mean for the startup. No, um, if a startup, if we integrate a startup solution in one of our solutions, that can mean quite a significant impact on the implementation times on the startup side. One of the things we also do at Ventures, we typically ask for a board observer seat in the investments that we do. And I know that many of the CVCs have someone from the Ventures team sitting at taking that board observer seat. And at Ventures, we also have some of the, no, in some of the investments, we have someone from Ventures sitting that, but we typically have someone from the business unit and somewhat at a higher level of in the business unit taking that role, because we believe that's also an important channel to maximize and generate the strategic value. So this person, typically we have a very deep knowledge in the specific industry that the startup is working on, all the network, the expertise, and so they can bring this value to the startup, and also the other way around. No, and also identify potential areas of collaboration to further generate the strategic value. So I would say that these are the main things that we bring to our ventures value proposition. Yeah.
Very nice. And I'll double click later on the observer board seat and how you are doing it differently from most, which I think is very interesting. One thing you mentioned earlier is that you have basically two focus areas. One is new growth opportunities, which is more long term, but also one which is kind of an ecosystem enablement and with partners. Are these superpowers equally applicable to these two areas, or do you see ways to engage differently?
Yes. So on the second track that you mentioned, the ecosystem one, that it's obviously much closer to our business units are doing today. The focus on from a strategic angle point of view is much more on the collaboration opportunity. So for example, we do require business unit sponsoring for this type of investments. We engage pre-investment, we engage in the discussions with the business unit and start having discussions with the startup as well on what are the potential areas that we see a strategic alignment, and that we can work together. It doesn't mean that this needs to be all solved out at closing. No, not at all. It's just that we start the discussion early on, and then it continues after the investment. So I would say for this ecosystem track or category, it's very much focused on short-term or immediate collaboration opportunities and learnings as well, of course. On the second one, not necessarily. No, it might, there might be the case that there's still it is a growth opportunity, it's more long term, but there are still opportunities to work something to do something together in the short term, but not necessarily. And here the goal is really to identify this and to be able to have a foot into this potentially and into this potential growth opportunities for Amadeus. And here we're still talking about minority stakes, but higher than the ecosystem deals that I've mentioned, because if things go well, idea might be that in the future we have we want to have a higher stake into this company. So might might end up being not so different in what regards to collaboration opportunities if there's room for that, but it doesn't need to be that the focus.
So I think this is a very good, maybe golden nugget, but a very good design choice where you have granularity on championship, whether it's more short-term ecosystem or you don't necessarily need championship when it's more long-term, but with a view of there's a probability of engagement, and that's why you would invest. And can you talk about your investment approval process in this case and how it's also granular between the first type and the second type?
Yes, that is actually something we changed a few years ago. So Amadeus Ventures was founded in 2014, as I mentioned in the beginning, and a few years after the start of the startup investment program, we did a review on how it went, how was it going, and in order to see how can we make the approval process more agile. And up until 2019, all the investment opportunities we were presenting them to the ExCom, to the executive committee, so CEO and direct reports, and so they were approved by the ExCom. And after 2019, after reviewing all the kind of performance of ventures, what we realized was that most of the investment opportunities that we pitched to the ExCom were approved. So we had a very high conversion rate in what regards pitching and approval. And the ones that were not approved, they were actually performed very well financially.
Oh,
And so
interesting.
what we proposed, and that what has been implemented since 2000 or early 2020, was to separate a bit the approval processes of these two tracks. So for the growth opportunities, we would still go to the ExCom. And the reason for this is that we're talking about more strategic investment
Yeah.
opportunities. And the type of discussions we would be having when pitching an investment opportunity is precisely the type of discussions that the ExCom values and
Yep.
and wants to be part of, right?
Yep.
And so we wouldn't change the approval process for that track, but for the second one, the ecosystem one, we would instead of going to the ExCom, we would go to the investment committee, which is a level lower in the governance of the company, and so that we would be able to have a bit more agile process for the second track, that it's not as relevant for the ExCom to be involved and discussing. And so that's why we have currently these two different approval processes depending on the type of investment.
It's very good. It's actually probably another golden nugget because you want to involve the executive committee whose time is very precious for the strategic, but when it's more on the tactical, that doesn't need them necessarily. So I think you have evolved into a really good granular design. And maybe that's a good question now to ask, which is very open, which is the why of your corporate VC. And here, the last 2 years, it's obvious it has been very challenging for the travel industry. Could you maybe point to some examples of how Amadeus Ventures was helpful to guide Amadeus corporations into what type of innovations are important, what kind of mega trends are starting to emerge, which was not obvious beforehand?
Definitely, and it's good that you ask, because this is something. It's actually something that I do not speak enough when presenting or speaking about Amadeus Ventures, which is the learnings piece of the value that we are bringing to the corporation. No, we are actually the eyes and ears of the corporation, of the business units, that meeting hundreds of startups every year, and that part of our role and the value that we can add to the organization is connecting all these dots and bringing them the bigger picture of the trends and what's happening outside of Amadeus. And I think that was particularly important during the the pandemic, especially the early days, no, where everyone was trying to understand what was happening, how it was impacting, no, the industry, the players, and I have to say that especially again during the early days, my connection level of engagement with the business units, obviously ones more than others, actually increased considerably, because we were not only because of the new startups that we were meeting, but also the um, existing startups that we had in our network that were coming back because they had pivoted and were addressing this new challenges and bringing solutions to address these challenges. So I remember, obviously, one of the first ones. And looking back, this one today sounds quite obvious, but the touchless topic, no, digitizing some of the touch points in the travel industry. And obviously this was a trend before, no, I had, before the pandemic, I had met numerous startups trying to digitize several steps of the traveler journey, namely, for example, in the hotel, the check-in, the checkout. But all of this was accelerated during the pandemic, and you could see this also in the traction, no, that some of the startups were showing. So that was definitely the first one. Then the trend, for example, of travelers looking for the outdoors, no, when they were planning their first trips after those first months. So the outdoor space, so marketplaces for RVs. The number of startups that we saw in this space that we met also increased considerably, no, during the pandemic, to address this need from the travelers. And then another example can be, for example, this work from home or work from anywhere trend. And what does this mean for the travel providers, no, in terms of the setup that the traveler is looking for? And even in what regards the business model, we started seeing some startups, some companies, either existing ones or new companies, bringing also different business models. Think about the subscription business model and hospitality, and so all of this was trends that we could observe from our interactions with startups, and that we were sharing with the organization, and that was part of their discussions, no, internally, those strategic meetings and retreats that they were having. So, but again, this is something that it's not. It wasn't a particular no event. This is something that we actually do on a recurring basis. Maybe I can deep dive into that if it makes sense to you regarding.
Actually, yes, I want to deep dive on the sharing. It's obvious that you can
Mhm,
observe a lot and you can learn a lot, and of course you share. But how do you share in a way that's actionable?
mhm. Um, so we have, each one of us within the ventures team, we look into different verticals.
Mm.
So I look, for example, into hospitality and a few others, and that allows us to develop a good relationship with our counterpart in the business unit, typically the head of strategy of the business unit, and we have this recurring touch points with them, where one of the objectives is sharing, and sharing in the two directions, no, for us it's very important to understand what's their strategy, no, what are their priorities, and especially how can ventures feed into that, because obviously not in all of them, no, and that makes our life much easier when looking for investment opportunities and screening startups. And then the other way around, obviously we use this opportunities with them to share specific investment opportunities, but also these trends that we are observing, no, and I don't have any secret sauce on how to share it and make it actionable. I would say that, and it's a bit more informal and probably less structured in this meetings that we have, But another example of how we try to do it for the broader organization, not only the teams in the business units that we work more closely, is through webinars, internal webinars that we do every quarter at least. The ventures team organizes webinars that are everyone in the company is invited to join, where we share trends, interesting startups that we met, not necessarily startups that fit our investment criteria, but even from an inspiration point of view that we think it's interesting for the organization to know. And lately we also started inviting CEOs of other our portfolio companies,
Ah.
or or companies that we are engaging with and that we met and we think are relevant, to do interviews with them in this webinar. So to give the entrepreneur the opportunity to in a very hopefully engaging way the opportunity to share with Amadeus what they are doing and what they're looking for and how that they can add value to Amadeus.
I really like the idea of this webinar, especially it creates more touch points for Amadeus, but also more touch points for your portfolio companies. How do you track result? How do you measure success for these webinars?
I think the webinars is actually one of the easiest parts. No, it's because it's quite measurable in the sense of number of attendees, questions that are asked during the webinars, and it's normal that after the webinar was done, that we get a few requests from people in several teams asking to know more about this or that, and so we can understand the impact that we are having in the organization through this webinars. And then thinking about beyond the webinars, how are we tracking this strategic value that we are generating? And I attended a few of the GCV events in the past, and this is always a very hot topic, no? And most of the panels, and at least when I would meet other CVC colleagues, that's always the topic we want to talk about and share our experiences and ideas. And here, what we do, I mentioned already about the webinar. We also thinking about kind of more on this, staying on this sharing topic, articles and blog posts that we do on ventures, and getting more into the strategic value that we generate with our portfolio companies. And not only our portfolio companies, because sometimes for some reason we might end up not investing in a company, but we always, independent from that, if we see that there is value, we always introduce them to the business unit.
This
And
is a
so we
best practice.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so we track this number of collaboration opportunities that are explored and executed with the portfolio companies and with other companies that are not in our portfolio, that we haven't invested. Number of referrals, for example, that we have done. These are the ones that I can think of now in terms of how are we measuring the strategic value that we generate.
And it's very nice because you make the point, which is an important point. You're going to see so many startups. You're not going to invest in all of them. Not all of them meet the investment criteria, but many of them are still valuable for engagements with the mothership. And so I think to have made that distinction is important. I want to go back and double click on the observer board seat. And here, first, I want to understand if you have the same granularity between the ecosystem type of investment versus a new growth opportunity type of investment. And how do you prepare your business group, business units, business lines, people to be on the board? Because it doesn't come without training, I'm sure. So how do you prepare them?
Yes. So in terms of how the different granularity between the two tracks, the board observer, I would say it's the standard, that we have in our ecosystem deals and also in our growth deals. In our growth deals, while on the ecosystem deals, we typically co-invest with other investors. In the growth deals, we can take the lead role, and so in those situations we might ask for more than the board observer, but it really depends case by case, no, and how we see it fitting into the overall strategy. And then your question in terms of preparation, no, with the
Yep.
business unit, yes, it requires preparation in terms of the obligations, no, of a board observer. And so we have typically 1 or 2 meetings with them to explain a bit what's expected, what's the role, and we are in permanent contact with them. We are in permanent contact with them as part of our portfolio management role as well.
Very nice. And maybe from the entrepreneur's point of view, I can see the pros and cons. They can
Mhm.
see the pros, which is they have someone who's going to know them and engage with them that actually work for the business unit. But the cons is maybe there is some kind of conflict of interest, or maybe some information they wish not to share everything. So how do you manage this maybe concerns from entrepreneurs?
I have to say that, and if you would tell me this before I joined the CVC, coming from my financial VC experience, I
Yeah.
would definitely see your concern. But this is something that uh, I all of the entrepreneurs I had this discussion with, no, we invested. They were all very eager to have someone from the business unit joining the board as a board observer. That's actually one of the key values that they would see out of our investment. So I have to be honest, I haven't faced that issue yet.
Which is very nice and counterintuitive. So that's good to have
Yeah.
your experience. Now, we've talked a few times about investment criteria. And clearly, there are startups which are interesting and worth introducing to Amadeus, but you don't invest in. So can you share maybe, and useful for the entrepreneurs who are listening in, what are your investment criteria?
Yes. So I think the first one I already mentioned, it has to do with the stage, no, and that sometimes is what implies that we might not invest, but we still see opportunities to collaborate. The other very important thing, and I think that's probably common to every single investor, corporate or not, is the team. No, and I think in our space, we obviously love when we have serial entrepreneurs that already have track record on creating successful companies, but also experience in the travel industry is a plus, not a must, but is a plus. So that gives us confidence that they are aware of the complexity of the industry, and that they would have the experience to address the challenges. Um, Important as well is scalability in a global context, because if you think about Amadeus, that we have such a global footprint, it's very important when we are discussing an investment opportunity or collaboration opportunity with a company, that they are or that they have the aim and the capability to become global, because otherwise I think it's much harder to have any a bit more niche specific collaboration opportunity. And then the final one is the strategic alignment, which is something I already I think I shared a few times during this conversation, that is obviously very important for us.
Very nice. And so one of your focus areas is hospitality. Are you building an investment thesis around that space? And are you trying to build what I would call a contrarian view, something you believe, but very few people in the ecosystem believe?
Um, how we work is, I wouldn't define I wouldn't say that it's part of my focus to build this contrarian view. My focus is actually on understanding, on one side, and here I'm obviously focusing more on the ecosystem deals, no, talking about the closer relationship with the business unit, trying to understand how do they see the future of hospitality and what's the role of Amadeus in that specific vertical, and how can ventures play a role into that, and so it's really understanding the needs of my internal customer, and and looking for solutions to address those needs and those problems.
Very nice. And so, what are you looking forward in the next 12 months?
Hmm.
First on hospitality, but then maybe wider afterwards for Amadeus Ventures.
I think our areas of focus for 2022 are actually applicable to hospitality as well. I would say they're quite transversal across the different business units, and you will understand why. The first one of them is sustainability, and this one has been a priority in the past. It's not something new coming into 2022, but it's still a high priority for us at Amadeus, and consequently at Amadeus Ventures. No, and if you think about the role of the travel industry and the recovery path, the importance of recovering in a sustainable way, and at Amadeus we actually have a very structured approach to how we look at sustainability, no, both at how we incorporate this element in our solutions, but also how we support our customers through their sustainability journey. And ventures plays quite an active and important role here in this topic. We are involved in the discussions that are happening internally, and our role here is on finding the partners and potential investment opportunities that will help Amadeus achieve these goals. And we're talking about very different areas that can be applicable to hospitality, airlines, and other verticals as well. So, for example, carbon offsetting, or calculator measuring, no, or operational efficiencies, no, increase operational efficiencies. So, and this is really a focus area for us. We have been working on in this space, spending quite some time in this space, and it is one of the prios for 2022 for sure. Then
maybe one question, which is,
yeah.
how many of your focus areas come from requests from business lines versus the one that comes from the top management? Like sustainability is clearly across the full organization.
Yeah.
But do you have sometimes requests that comes directly from one of the business units?
Yes, we do have requests that come directly from the business units, and whenever that happens, that's when we do kind of a very proactive research in that specific area, no, to be able to have to map the competitive landscape in this space, and to find the most interesting companies and hopefully investment opportunities. So I would say that this happens. Not necessarily, we don't do a big exercise towards the end of the year, for example, with the business units. It is continuously happening, and exactly.
Very nice. And just so we have a feel, how big is the team, and how many people do you interact with Amadeus Corporation?
The first one is easy to answer. We are 4 persons. It's a 4-person team at Amadeus Ventures. The second one, I don't think I'm able to answer because there are just so many. No, I would say, just to simplify, with each business unit, we have one primary contact, which is typically the head of strategy. But obviously, then we end up also discussing with the solutions team, no, when we're talking more about the specific collaborations opportunities or integrations opportunities. The corporate strategy, we actually sit, Amadeus Ventures is part of the corporate strategy team at Amadeus. So we also engage with our colleagues in the corporate strategy team, thinking more about the growth, no, opportunities. So I don't even have an idea of how many people we engage with on a frequent recurring basis.
Which is a big number enough to be able to say. And so I want to finish with one question, which is about you, Marta. What it is that you are most excited about investing in the next 12 months, and why?
It's hard to 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 pick something. I have to say that, and I probably can mention this one and then mention another one, just not to repeat myself, because
Totally okay.
sustainability is definitely a very interesting topic, no. And I think working in the travel industry, it's a very relevant topic. And I had the opportunity to be working to be to be spending quite some time over the last few months looking into this space and speaking with a few startups. So I definitely foresee that this will be an exciting year in what regards sustainability for Amadeus Ventures. Other areas that I can mention is, this might sound a bit too broad, but I think it's very, very relevant, is everything that will make the traveler journey easier. So if you think when I was traveling, there were so many pain points, no, things that
Friction.
could be, exactly, frictions that could be improved. And if you think about the last 2 years, it didn't get better, right? Actually, the number of frictions probably
Yep.
increased, no, due to the pandemic. And so there are lots of opportunities there, and there are several startups, no, addressing different pain points and developing solutions that either would help our customers uh, make the journey easier for the end traveler, or easing the journey directly for the end traveler. So I think that's a very interesting space. I know, very broad, but I think I'm quite excited with what we are seeing.
I'm actually glad you have these two, because in a way it nearly feels like a yin and a yang, because the less friction to travel, the more travel. And if you don't think about sustainability at the same time, you go into the wrong direction. So I think it's actually quite nice to hear that sustainability is going to be something you look at. And given the platform that Amadeus provides and the reach, I think to have sustainability as part of your investment criteria, as part of your focus areas, is really inspiring. So I can say thank you on behalf of everyone, including the travelers, that you're looking into this. Thank you. And Marta, thank you also for sharing your insights, your personal journey, and what you are excited about. And also, I really appreciated this granularity of investments and how you have different investment approval process depending on what type of investment it is, whether it's more tactical or strategic. And I think that is a golden nugget from today.
Great. No, thanks a lot for the invite, Nicola. It has been a pleasure to be able to share with you and the audience a bit more about what we do and what we look for.